16 Pros and Cons of Living in Minnesota. As someone who lived in South Dakota for nearly a decade, Minnesota was the best-kept secret of us East River folk. You could drive for a few minutes from my house in Brandon and be in Minnesota before you spit out a sunflower seed. About 18 miles, to be exact. Meanwhile, I will stop daydreaming about the land of 10,000 lakes and take you there in words to see if it is worth a move for you. Pros of living in Minnesota. 1. Being near the Mall of America. Located in Bloomington, the Mall of America is Disneyland for shopaholics. There is at least one amusement park with 8 roller coasters in this mall. I have been there. It is insane. You do not have to pay to walk into the mall, either, but they certainly want you to spend some money while shopping. 2. The Science Museum of Minnesota is fun for all ages. A very spacious and expensive science museum is located in Minneapolis. The Science Museum of Minnesota has Egyptian mummies, dinosaur replicas, and giant ships. There are so many exhibits to experience, including an indoor sports area for testing your arm strength when throwing all types of balls. This is a great way to spend a winter's day when there is a blizzard outside. Plus, you can score one of those cool trending purple sweatshirts as seen in the Stranger Things television series. 3. The Great Lakes is everything in the land of 10,000 lakes. Speaking of outside, the land of 10,000 lakes is in the northern part of the state of Minnesota. The state has 11,842 lakes, which is even more epic. More than 14,000 ponds, lakes, rivers, and streams of freshwater take over Minnesota throughout the year. If you love to swim, fish, ice fish, or sail, then this is the state for you. Grab an oar and prepare to paddle. There are outdoor recreations, including ice skating, ice hockey, and camping, that let you enjoy these picturesque waterways all over the state. 4. Cost of living in Minnesota is not high. The cost of living in Minnesota is 2.5% less than in the rest of the nation. If you want to move to Minnesota, the cost of living is the 20th highest in the U.S. Expect to pay less for healthcare, but almost 100%, at 101.9% for housing and less for utilities. According to the Minnesota Employment and Economic Development, the monthly cost for 2 parents, both working full-time with 2 children as a family unit, is $94,164 a year, or $22.64 an hour. $1,905 in childcare, $1,073 for food, $571 on healthcare, $1,602 on housing, $814 transportation, $732 on miscellaneous, $1,150 on state taxes. 5. Twins baseball is a major league sport and the Vikings roll in football. If you are into baseball and love the Minnesota Twins, you are always going to get a first glimpse at your favorite team. Yay for baseball and the concessions that it brings each spring. By fall, everyone will be sporting purple shirts to support the Vikings football team. Minnesota is one of few Midwestern states big enough to have its own NFL team. This means most of the locals, including the Dakota residents, will travel a few hours just to see a game. Sports also give residents something to do indoors as a break from the weather. 6. Vegans have the only vegan butcher in the state in Minnesota. Minnesota is not exactly the most famous for its vegan or vegetarian cuisine, but neither are any of the other states in the Midwest. I lived in South Dakota for 8 years and found one vegetarian restaurant in all of Sioux Falls, forget a vegan restaurant. However, if you are vegan and live in this Midwestern state, you must check out the first vegan butcher in the U.S. called the Herbivorous Butcher. The butcher is located on 1st Avenue in Minneapolis. It is amazing and worth talking about, especially after visiting the Prince Museum. 7. The Prince Museum at Paisley Park is in Minneapolis too. Speaking of purple, one of the princes of pop, the actual prince, was alive and then died in Minneapolis. It was a big deal when it happened, and now you can visit Paisley Park and see some of the musicians' prized collections of guitars, outfits, and music facts. Prince lived and had his personal recording studio in Paisley Park, in the town of Chanhassen, southwest of Minneapolis, only 20 miles. In fact, Chanhassen is worth considering if you are moving to the state. The city of Chanhassen was recognized as the best community festival for the 4th of July, among the best places to live in the nation, and a top 10 town to raise a family. 8. Ice castles. They have actual ice castles open to the public. As a South Dakota resident, I never made it to one of those ice castles in Minnesota. The only reason being it was a long drive of a few hours that had to occur super early in order to see these ice sculptures in the daylight. If you get there at 2 p.m., the sun is cresting the ridge already. However, if you live in Minnesota, the many free ice castles that are giant playgrounds of solid ice are really happening and probably in your backyard. That is the biggest pro I can find about living in Minnesota. Cons of living in Minnesota. 1. Some counties are more than $100,000 a year on the cost of living. The most expensive counties are Scott, Sherburne, Wright, Ramsey, Isanti, Hennepin, Dakota, Carver, and Anoka, where is more than $100,000 a year to live in these counties. Other counties in the state cost a yearly average of less than $100,000 for food, healthcare, housing, etc. If you are on a budget, avoid moving to these more expensive counties, at least until you get settled. 2. It snows heavily and gets very cold in the winter months. If you have never lived in cold temperatures, be advised it gets hairy. Blizzard conditions and sub-zero temperatures with wind chills of -40 degrees Fahrenheit are not uncommon. You might even get snowed in or lose power due to ice storms in the wintertime. It is a whole new world for someone who comes from Florida or Hawaii. Be prepared to shell out big on winter gear in the first few seasons as you get your bearings. For example, you will soon appreciate the $10,000 price tag on a machine-operated and human-powered snowblower to clean off your driveway. 3. Winter sports include ice-related activities. Ice hockey, ice fishing, camping on ice, these are a few of a Minnesotan's favorite things to do in the wintertime. Watching TV while bundled up and staying indoors where it is warm is also a winning sport. If you want to see sunshine and play basketball on the court in your new neighborhood, you had better sign up for an indoor sports center. You do have to have an affinity or at least an appreciation for winter sports if you plan on moving to Minnesota. 4. Shopping is a major sport here too. The largest shopping mall in the U.S., the Mall of America, is in Bloomington, right outside of the Twin Cities. You will want to go more than once, just to see the entire place. There is also the Midwest IKEA store right there too. The thing is, in South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa, not many of the stores in the Mall of America are found. Therefore, everyone from the Midwest comes to shop at the Mall of America. Sure, it might be big, but it also stays busy most of the year thanks to plenty of regional and international shoppers. Living in the mall area means far too much traffic and attention to the mall too. 5. The Pacific and the Atlantic are both equally very far away. Feeling sick about the sea? Stop thinking about moving to Minnesota then, because you will only distance yourself further away. The state is smack dab right in the middle where the oceans are the last thing on anyone's mind. You avoid talking about the ocean, beach, waves, and surf because it only makes everyone sick with envy. Therefore, if you lust for sea breezes, stay away from Minnesota. 6. Mountain climbers will have a hard time climbing a peak here. Minnesota is a flatland state. Flatlanders love it, but those who crave mountain crags do not get the open space at all. If you prefer to see mountains and climb them, forget it in Minnesota. 7. Recreational cannabis is not legal, but medicinal cannabis is sold in MN. The state of Minnesota legalized medicinal cannabis available through a doctor's office under strict protocols in 2014. But this is not recreational cannabis sold at dispensaries as they do on the West Coast at all. So if you are used to smoking cannabis legally and recreationally, forget about it here. You will be able to find and purchase cannabis only if you go through a medical provider and prove that you need it for health reasons. For most cannabis users, this is a lot and not worth the hassle. 8. Flannel is for real in Minnesota, and so are hot dishes and Midwesterners. There is a culture in the Midwest that stipulates you must wear red and black flannel button-up shirts and serve hot dishes at dinner time. These Midwesterners, including Minnesotans, sure are also very into their own culture. If you spend some time listening to their regional accents, you will start to pick up on this a little bit. In time, you will also become a Minnesotan in some regard. You will also start to lose your previous identity and find yourself wearing far too much flannel. That could be an issue,